thank you all for being here tonight. I'm hoping that this will be beneficial to you during this Lenten season as we have this series of talks on God for Grownups. And we're looking at God for Grownups and what that might mean. What is our images of God? We have to look at that question. And it all starts in childhood, right? Is your vision of God Santa Claus, police officer with a radar gun? Better not go over that speed limit. You know, my image of God is a bit like Santa Claus when I was young, and it was more like the Lincoln Memorial. You ever seen that seat that Lincoln's on? Kind of pictured God on that seat, and me being really small compared to him, looking up at him. It's like Santa Claus, only without the beard and the big belly overall. And I think about that, and God was Santa Claus in a way. If I was good, then I would receive good in return. If I was bad, I would be punished overall. A lot like my parents. And my parents, you need to have discipline in your life. So I'm not knocking my parents overall. But looking at that image, and my question to you is, what voice do you hear when God speaks to you? For me, for the longest time, it was my dad or my mom. And it wasn't until until I got into high school and college and seminary that I started to hear some other voices in my life for God. And this concept of unconditional love. My parents were certainly unconditional at times growing up. But this concept of God being unconditional. No longer the if in our life. If you do this, I will love you. No, it's just flat out, I love you for who you are right now. But what is that voice? It tends to be one of those parents, doesn't it, in our life? Well, I want to tell you a story. Let's just get right to it. 14 years ago, I'd just been a priest for 2 years. Now let me go further back. All right, gotta know how I got to be 2 years out of the seminary as a priest. And so a little bit of my vocation story. When I was growing up, I thought off and on about being a priest. And when I got to and that had to do a lot with my dad. My dad encouraged us in our family that if there was somebody who wanted to have, who had a vocation, that he would support them 100%. And so that had some influence on me. But when I got to be about 7th or 8th grade, no, I was thinking about marriage. More of that. I was sharing some of this story with, I was on a retreat at a prison, and I know that when I'm in a prison with a bunch of people, they don't understand celibacy. Some of them don't. And I had to be clear with them why I was saying either marriage or either being a priest. Had to let them know that. And I was explaining that to them, and there was one guy, and that was the end of my talk for him. He couldn't get past that. Celibacy, what is that? But hopefully I haven't lost you there. I don't think I have. And you won't be stuck there the rest of the night. But so early high school, not really thinking much about that anymore. And then I went on a tech, Teenagers Encounter Christ. And on that tech, it really changed my perspective. I had a real encounter with God, with Jesus on that retreat. That's the beauty of our faith, in that it isn't some kind of thought process. It's an experience and an encounter with the person of Jesus in that retreat. So that from there got me praying again, and immediately I started thinking again about being a priest. And that's how you know if you ever experienced, you've been on a retreat and you come right off the retreat, there's a high. And everything, you're peaking and everything is great and all that. But then after a couple weeks, it kind of slides away. So I was back to like, I think I want to be married. So went through, that was still lurking in the back of my mind though, stayed there, and I went into college and got to be my last year, and I'd always kind of sort of thought about it. Got to be my last year, coming up on my last year, and I really thought, well, what am I going to do with my life overall? I want to do something with my faith in my life, and I can't see me working in an office and sometimes sharing my faith. I wanted to do it with my whole life. And so I decided in that year that I would go into the seminary and see what it was like. So I went in, I graduated, got my degree first, and then I went into the seminary. And I was in the seminary for 2 years, and I still wasn't sure. And I left for a couple years. But then I came back. During those 2 years, I really realized what I wanted to do. It became crystal clear in the sense that part of the issue is I'd been doing a lot of school, and the seminary was just a lot of school, and it really wasn't an experience of what it would be like in the parish, which would be completely different. And so when I left the seminary, I got a job working at a school teaching. Now, that was a good experience to some degree. I had first through eighth grade computers, and don't ask me about computers as much. So I was just telling somebody I'm the only tech at our parish. I'm the main IT guy. Everybody else does the computers for us, don't get me wrong, but it seems like they always end up turning to me when there's something simple going wrong with the computer. So, and then I had sixth grade religion there, and I could see what the priests were doing in the parish, and I could see that I wanted to be like them. See, they would come into the classroom just for 1 hour in a week, and they would be the rock star. And I wanted to be that rock star. I didn't want to have to teach all the time, especially eighth graders. I only had the eighth graders for, of the day, I would have the eighth graders for about an hour because I just had their homeroom. And just that was enough to dread going to school. The other classes were all right because they could never pull something over me like the eighth graders. The eighth graders already tried me, so I'd be like, yeah, I've seen that before. So got that experience and realizing that now that's priesthood is something, I think I can do that. And then the following year I got a job in a parish doing some youth ministry and doing RCIA. And then I could really see that was something I wanted to do in my life. So back in the seminary I went. I was 92 when I started, and 8 years in total later, I was ordained a priest in 2000. Now, it was to my story. We're getting right back up to where I am. I was ordained for 2 years, and everything seemed to be going well. And then it happened. I went into a depression. Now, nobody deserves or chooses to have a depression or can make themselves have a depression, is what I'm saying. There are triggers in our life in that, but it doesn't warrant a depression. But the triggers in my life is I was living on a seesaw. And that seesaw was either I had to do it all on my own or someone had to do it for me. Back and forth. And, so it was either really me handling it all by myself or me running away from my problems. And finally, all of that came crashing down on me one day, led me into a lot of trouble, and just came crashing down on me. And I went into a full-blown depression. Now, let me tell you a little bit of what that was like if you haven't been in a depression or whatever. But I'll tell you. The doctors say that your serotonin level has emptied, has drained. And for me, that felt like I had lost all my confidence in my ability. There was so much fear in doing any little thing that I was trying to do. And then your brain plays tricks on you. And it tells you how horrible you are. All this shame and that you're not worth it, that you're no good, that everything in your life is wrong. And then you feel hopeless, like that's never going to change. That's the worst part about it, is feeling hopeless and feeling like it never was going to change, that you're stuck in a prison. That's just a little bit of that I'll share with you. And part of it is, at times you feel like you're better off dead than alive. So the good news is I kind of understood that to a little degree, that it's a state, it's a medical condition, is what it is. So what I had to do in my life is one of the hardest things I had to do was to ask for help. And luckily I had a support group, pre-support group, and they got me, they supported me, they helped me to see that it was my pride, and it was kind of back to that, either I do it all on my own, kind of that attitude, I've got to handle this all on my own. And they helped me to see that that's not working. That's just not working in life. And so I finally got help, talked to a psychologist. And one of the first things this psychologist, I had been going to a psychologist, but I finally got honest with him. And one of the first things that psychologist taught me was that only you can do it, and you can't do it alone. Have you heard me say that before? That's where it was coming from. Because that is just so true. Only you can do it, and you cannot do it alone. It sounds contradictory, but it's not. It's very simple. Let's pretend this altar is my altar. I know it belongs to everybody here, but we're just going to pretend for a moment that this is my altar. Now, only I can do it. Only I choose where this altar goes. If it's my altar, we're pretending, okay? And so, for right now, I want it right there. But you know what? I might change my mind and decide, I want it in my office. And so, if you look at that altar, it's heavy. It's big. Now, can you imagine me trying to do that on my own? Only I can choose where to put this altar. It's mine. But if I tried to move this on my own, I'm going to get hurt and probably break the altar too at the same time. What would be much easier is if I asked for help. Yes, I know what I want to do, but I need help in doing what I need to do or want to do. And so I can get a couple people, or I can get a whole bunch of people and make it really easy. The problem in my life with that being on that seesaw, I wanted somebody to tell me what to do backwards. I wanted somebody to tell me what to do, and then I wanted to go off and do it on my own. And when it didn't work, I'm going to go blame that guy because it's their fault. When it really was my choice. Yeah. So that was a very big, important step for me to start to see that in my life and how important it. Only I can do it. If I wanted to be healthy, only I can choose to do that in my life. And I cannot do it alone. I need other people's help. So another person that I got help from then was a spiritual director. And I got honest with her. Now, the biggest hurdle in my life, I forgot to mention, I was going to say this earlier, is that there's a predisposition in my family towards mental illness. There's a number of family members that suffer from schizophrenia and depression. And so that's part of the reason, part of it, there's a natural disposition in my family that leans toward this. And they are all on medicine. And one of the biggest hurdles in my life was, I am going to need medicine too. And that was one of the things I thought to myself, that's something I'll never ever do. That's maybe what they need, but that's not something that I will do in my life. And thankfully, I had a lot of friends encouraging me, helping me to see my pride and to let go of my ego and to get the medicine that I need. And that was very important because that helped me very much in my life. And it was one of those things that I really resisted for a while, just doing a little bit, but not really getting the medication I really needed. And once I've got that, I got to tell you, that has helped me to feel so much better. Now, the reason why I told you all this, let me double check some things. Over here. My image of God had to change. And that it wasn't working. The tables had turned on me in my life. What is going on? I'm a good Catholic. I even became a priest. Why is this happening to me? It's not working with that old Santa Claus God thing isn't working anymore. And I was really angry at God. Why is he doing this to me? Furious. And that was a really hard thing because I had been taught, don't get angry at God. You're not supposed to get angry at God. Right? How many of you know that in your life or heard that before? You know, it was really hard. I had been told otherwise. I knew it up here that it was okay to be angry. I mean, I was a priest for 2 years, and I certainly preached that, but it wasn't applying to me. You know, it's so important that that you preach to yourself, and that because then a lot of times people can understand, relate. So I was very angry, and so if I can't be angry at God, then I gotta be angry at me. What is depression? It's anger turned inward. Is what it is. So the more angry I got at God about what was going on, the more I took it out on myself. Because God loves me. Why is he doing this to me? So I told my spiritual director that, and she told me, of all things, go tell God that you're angry. Bring that into your prayer. Now, I was scared. But I let God have it. I gave it to God in the vernacular. And we'll leave it at that. And you know what? I didn't blow up. I didn't get struck by lightning. And God does respond. God does respond. It may take some time. Have to be ready for it. But I was talking to my counselor, and I was just like, why is God doing this to me? And he said to me, I'm sorry you're going through this, but God isn't doing this. It just is. It's the way of the world. It is. The world is neutral. God isn't doing this to you. It's just the way that the world is. Now, we might be mad as to why God created this world overall then. But the only answer I can see is to give us our freedom. And then he told me, this was really hard to hear. One genetic switch this way or that way. And that might be why you suffer from depression. That was really hard to accept, and that's part of my predisposition in my family history. So, but after a while, I took it in, and I came to understand and accept that in my life. It's just the way it is. Then another question arose in me. More anger at God. Where the heck were you? Where are you? And my spiritual director challenged me to bring that to God. Still afraid again. And other people were challenging me to bring that to God. And so I did. I kept doing that. And as God answers in His own time, I was driving on the highway having a really bad day. Dealing with my depression. And I was crying. Where are you, God? And I noticed that it was raining. And it began to rain these huge drops of rain. I don't know if you've ever had that happen, where there are these huge drops. These huge drops. And I began to realize where God was at. He was crying with me, suffering with me. 2,000 years ago, His Son suffered with us, and that happens today. And I got to tell you, that lifted a burden off my shoulders, knowing that God was with me. I got to say today, this is going to sound really weird, but I thank God for the depression of all things. If I had kept going in my life, I would never know the relationship that I was missing out on with God. I would never know His love. And I would never know in my life how much God loved me, no matter how angry I was at God. He wasn't going to leave me. That's what real relationships are, that we can share what's going on. And I also could understand to a deeper level now, because of my wound, I could understand to degree some level of other people's wounds in my life that I had never knew, or knew what was going on for them and how they were suffering. Now, that's not the God that I thought of as a kid. That wasn't the God who was wrathful, distant, a bean counter. A bean counter when it comes to prayer. I often thought that, I got to pray so much and outweigh my sins, and then everything will be all right. Crazy. Instead, I came to see that God was closer, living within me. I'm not God, but I was experiencing His presence in me, and I in Him. Overall, how do we relate to the Father? Whenever I use the word God, I really mean Father when I was talking. And Jesus, what did He do? How did He relate to God? He called God Abba, right? The song we sang, which is a term of endearment. Daddy. That really didn't hit home for me until one day, whatever, until I was watching the show, and I don't know if you watched it or not, but NCIS. And you don't have to have seen the show to know what I'm talking about. I'll explain it. But there is a character on the show named Ziva, and Ziva is a Jew from Israel. And they showed a flashback of her as a child when she was 10 years old. And they speak Aramaic, living in Israel. And her dad is leaving. He's getting divorced from her mother. And he's packing everything up. And she is just screaming, Abba, Abba. And I don't know the words, but she says it in Aramaic. Don't go, Abba. And that really struck a chord when I saw that. That really put reality to those words of what Jesus was saying. Abba, that close term of endearment. And so I look at Jesus and how he had that term that was so special, that showed that he had such a close relationship, an intimate relationship with God, with the Father. And the question is, do we view God as distant, or are we willing to take a step that is revolutionary? To start to see God so close, to have that term of endearment in our life, whatever that might be. You know how people call people nicknames, as a term of affection. I found that out especially here. There's all these nicknames. Somebody named Bud. I got to go to the hospital. Well, Bud isn't their first name. And guess what? If you don't know their first name along with their last name, usually I have the last name there, but if I don't know their first name, they won't tell me what room he's in. Did you know that? So always make sure if you got a nickname that you're in the hospital that you let me know what your real first name is. But what is that term of endearment that we might find that can open the door for us to see how close God is? Somehow, some way, it's so important to find that relationship with God that is so close. Some way, somehow, finding that term of affection. Paul calls God Papa, and that Deacon Paul. But finding that term. I was thinking, there's this movie called The Shack. There's a book called The Shack. You probably all read it, right? And it's out as a movie, and I should have went and saw it instead. I played cards and lost last night. Anyway, I've read the book, and there is the main character, and he has a terrible relationship with his father. His father was abusive. And so when he sees God comes to him, instead of a father, comes to him as a mother, an old black lady. And I bring that up. That's just a way that I look at things, but somehow, some way, what I'm trying to get at is finding that closeness of God, relating to God as a parent in our life, some way, somehow. I think it's important that we find that. And if there is a roadblock in our life that makes us hard to relate to God in one way, I think it's important to open it up another way so that we can relate. But it's important to find that. Let's see. Just wanted to look at my time. I'm doing pretty good here. So I had no idea whether this was going to last a half hour or the full 50 minutes. Now, you can't talk about God the Father without talking about the prodigal son, right? You've got to talk about the prodigal son because it is so powerful. It helps us to understand it. And let me refresh your memory when it comes to the prodigal son. There's these two sons, and I want to let you know right away that both of these sons are very important, that I'm going to talk about both of these sons. They're very important in how they relate to their father. So the one son decides to tell the father that he wants his inheritance, which is obviously a slap in the face because the guy's not even dead. But the father in the story is gracious, and he gives him half of the estate. A couple days later, he collects his belongings and he goes off to Vegas. That's what he did, basically. Give it another name, Babylon or whatever. And so, if you listen, he lives a life of dissipation. Dissipation. He squandered, wasted his money. His life became about partying, dissipation. And living that life of dissipation is, you can't concentrate. You can't really focus your life. You can't really, it's like you've given up on meaning, and you really can't find any meaning in life. There's no meaning in your life. It's so sad. So he was living this life of dissipation, and it always ends. It's a very tragic situation, and a lot of times it ends tragically. We all know people who lived lives of dissipation. All we got to do is look at Hollywood, and you see people living lives of dissipation that end their life tragically. Janis Joplin or John Belushi. The list goes on and on. And so the son ends up doing the lowest of the low things. He runs out of money, and he hires himself off to a pig farmer. Now, that's a great thing, but I'm looking at you. But not if you're Jewish. Not if you're Jewish, because that was the lowest low you could get, is having to work with pigs because they were unclean. They didn't eat pigs. Still don't. So that was the lowest of the low. And then he couldn't even eat what the pigs got to eat. So he was below the pigs. But then he came to his senses. And he thought that, well, my father's workers have it so much better than I have. Maybe my father will at least take me back as one of his servants. I will go to him and tell him that I have sinned against him, sinned against heaven and against him. And so he's heading back. And the father all along is looking for the son in the story. He's always been looking. And he sees them off in a distance. And he runs. Runs to the son. And before the son can even apologize, he's already embraced him and is kissing him. Already. Before he's even apologized. And he apologizes, and the father says, bring out the finest clothes, put a ring on his finger, and let's throw a party for my son. Kill the Big Mac. And bring it in. But then there's the other son. And the other son is seething, right? And he won't go into the party. And the father comes out, and he just lets his father have it. You know, you never gave me even a goat. I've done all these things for you. All these things. And then the father says, well, whatever I have is yours. As it always has been. And he won't go in. What's going on with the other son? The one son is dissipating his life. But now he's come back from the dead. He has a relationship with his father that he hadn't had before. The other son is the reverse. He is suffocating in life, isn't he? Suffocating. His life has all been about keeping the rules and doing everything right, and following orders. But that, he still doesn't have. He doesn't have a real relationship, does he, with the Father? It's all been about the rules for him. And the irony of the story is that because of the other son's dissipation in his life, he finally connects to the Father and tells how he really feels. And hopefully, we don't know how the rest of the story goes, but hopefully that conversation continues. You know? You know, the suffocation, doing everything, you know, playing the martyr, doing everything, got to be perfect, you know, or being the one living life in dissipation, where you're out partying and life has no meaning. There's that back and forth seesaw again. And both of those ways of life are about avoiding real relationships. Can never have a real relationship living either way of either one of those lives. Doesn't work. Let's see here.